Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Vibrant You. Today is less of an episode or a conversation and really more like an ultimate guide for women's preconception health for a happy, healthy baby and pregnancy. So if you are a woman starting to think about having a baby, or maybe you and your partner are already open or trying to conceive, or maybe you just know that one day you will want to start a family and you are like me and you want to be prepared, then of course this episode is for you. And of course, if that is you, make sure that you hit download on this episode now and save it for later so you don't lose it. So we are going to go over so much in today's episode, from preconception lab testing to detox protocols before conception to preconception nutrition and supplements that I recommend, and if it's really necessary for pregnancy or not. And overall, how to get your health and hormones in the best possible shape for creating the happiest, healthiest, most vibrant pregnancy possible. And in this conversation, I am not going to hold back. These are some of the exact tips and protocols that I share with my preconception clients inside my one-on-one Vibrant Mama to Be program, where I work with women over the span of a few months to optimize their health and hormones for optimal conception. So before we dive in though, I just want to say a massive thank you. Today is our 30th episode, and I'm just so grateful for you tuning in each and every week. I absolutely love seeing you share your favorite episodes on your Instagram story. I love seeing you share this with friends. Of course, if you are loving the podcast, I am wondering if in celebration of our 30th podcast episode, would you do me a favor real quick right now and hop on over to either Spotify or Apple Podcast, wherever you're listening, and please give me a 5-star rating on Spotify or 5-star written review on Apple Podcast. This would mean the absolute world to me, and this really helps to boost the podcast and helps get this information, this knowledge, this wisdom into just the bodies, the minds, and hearts of more people around the world, and truly just supports my personal mission in making the world a happier, healthier, more vibrant place. So please and thank you. That would mean the world to me, and send me a screenshot. I would love to see your review and celebrate with you and just give you a big personal virtual hug. Okay, so let's get right into it. What is preconception health to begin with? So this is something that there is just, in my opinion, not enough talk about in the world, in women's health, in the medicine world. You know, there's so much talk about fertility as from a more reactive place than a proactive place. So for me, preconception, we really should be proactive with it, not just, reactive when we have issues with fertility or we've been trying for months and what is happening? There must be something wrong. But really, preconception health is what I like to call trimester 0. So before we get even pregnant, how can we really get our bodies, our minds into the best optimal health, optimize our hormones, get our nutrient stores up, do everything that we need to really create the possibility of the happiest, healthiest pregnancy. And most of the talk out there, like if you're to just do a quick Google search on like preconception health, all that you're going to find out there is really like, try to reduce your stress levels and maybe stop drinking alcohol as much and like take a prenatal multivitamin a few months before you want to conceive. And as an integrative health practitioner that specializes in women's health and hormones, I just cannot stress enough the importance of really preparing our bodies in the best possible way. And that being said, like if you are already pregnant or if you do get pregnant without doing all of this in advance, amazing. This is something to celebrate. And women have been, having healthy, beautiful pregnancies since the beginning of time. And yeah, I really just hope that this episode can be a pillar of education and wisdom and support. And and don't stress. Like if you're already further along, you're having a healthy pregnancy, that's just a great sign that your body's already feeling so happy and healthy and well. But everything that I'm going to share with you today is, of course, if you are in this journey and let's say within the next year, you and your partner would like to start a family, this is actually what I would personally do. So I know that I want to have kids one day, and this is feeling closer and closer for me. This is a protocol and some tips that I will personally be following, as well as what I share often with my own preconception clients. This is exactly what we go over. So let's get right into it. I have 6 main areas that we are going to get into today. So the first area that we'd want to optimize for preconception health is really to do some preconception lab testing. And lab testing, right, a basic blood draw, as well as some functional lab testing, will really give us some raw data to see exactly where you're currently at when it comes to your health, your gut health, your nutrient stores, your hormones, and really give us a metric of where you're at and the areas in which we could really start to optimize when it comes to your health. So it just gives us a clear picture of where you're at and the key areas where we can optimize to create the happiest, healthiest pregnancy and baby for yourself. So I actually created a full reel on this on Instagram, which I'll link up the link to the reel in the show notes here. But you can just look me up. My handle is @BindyStables and scroll through my reels. Eventually you're going to find one on the 6 tests that you need for preconception health. And I'll go over them briefly here, but in case you're driving or walking, you can't write this down. That's where you can refer back to it, is just go to that reel on Instagram. I have it all clearly written out for you to make things really nice and easy, and make sure you save that post when you go to your practitioner or to share with your partner to know exactly which tests you would want to be looking at. So I'm going to share with you the exact tests that in a perfect world I would run for myself, I would run for my clients. And just keep in mind that if you are to just like go to your doctor and you just want to have like an annual blood draw, it's very unlikely that they would do the level of testing that I personally as an integrative practitioner would love to see optimal health. So they may draw, they may do like a basic complete blood count, they may do a basic or complete metabolic panel, but a lot of these other ones that I'm about to share with you, it's very unlikely that they would be willing to do unless you really push for it. And depending on insurance and what country you're in, it totally depends. So this is a lot of the testing that I will recommend and help my clients get depending on where they are in the world. But let's get into it. Preconception testing. First, we'd want to be looking at your complete blood count. So it's going to look at your red blood cells, your white blood cells, pretty standard stuff. It's a snapshot of your blood chemistry. We'd want to be looking at your complete metabolic panel, which looks at things like blood sugar and insulin and more markers towards your metabolism and how well your body is metabolizing. Very important for preconception health. And then we'd really want to be looking at some key vitamins and minerals that naturally get used up and burnt through with pregnancy, right? You're growing another human. So it would make sense that things like vitamin D and iron and retinol or vitamin A, a lot of these nutrients would get depleted. So we want to test for them. So the main vitamins and minerals I'd love for you to be looking at is going to be things like vitamin B12. You'd want to look at your folate. I'd love to test for your magnesium and your zinc, ideally from your red blood cell count. There's a few options from where different practitioners test for these. Some are more accurate than others. Would love to have a look at your vitamin D, your iron, your ferritin, your retinol, homocysteine. These are some of the main vitamins and minerals that we would love to have a look at. Next, we'd want to look for a key inflammation marker to see where your body's at. How inflamed or how not inflamed is your body? It gives us a lot of insight by looking up your CRP. So testing for your C-reactive protein. This is another main one. And then the last few that I would love to look for from a basic just blood draw is blood sugar markers. So hemoglobin, A1C, and fasting insulin, as well as your thyroid markers, as your thyroid is such a key central pillar in, of course, your metabolic health, but also your sex hormones. We really need to have thyroid really optimal for healthy, happy baby. So for thyroid, we don't want to just test TSH. We want to also be looking up FT3 and FT4, or free T3 and free T4. And again, if this sounds like a lot, please check out the Instagram post, the reel that I shared. It breaks it all down. You just copy paste or save the post, and you don't have to memorize this, but I want to share this information with you. So that is part 1 of the testing. So really, that is a basic blood draw that I support my clients with. We look at it as well. We look at blood from a functional perspective. So I recently had a preconception client, actually a friend, come through. She wanted my support. Her and her partner are ready to start trying for their first baby, which is so exciting. And I just recommended to her, hey, let's get you some blood work. I'd love to have a look at it. Let's go over it together. And of course, the lab results that she got back were all basically within range, which is amazing. However, I'm always, as an integrative health practitioner, looking at blood work, right? We call it bio-individual blood work analysis. So we're looking at it from the lens of a functional or an optimal perspective. So reference ranges are simply so wide, and I've dedicated a full podcast episode to this on blood work, on blood draws, why your blood work may not be enough. So I'm just looking it up here. The podcast episode is episode number 14. It's called Why Your Blood Work Isn't Enough, Conventional versus Functional Lab Testing for Unlocking Ultimate Health. And really what we share in there is why you can't just take a blood draw and look at the reference ranges, because what is in range is simply what's common, right? And common or average is not optimal. And for the happiest, healthiest possible pregnancy, we want you at optimal health, optimal nutrient stores, even a surplus of certain nutrient stores, so that your body really has more than enough of these nutrient stores to grow another human without, the growing fetus really like stealing a lot of that nutrient from your body as the mama and pulling calcium from your bones to produce the skeleton of the baby, right? We want to get that from food and make sure that there's an abundance of calcium in our tissues so that we don't have to pull from the bones, and make the bones more brittle through pregnancy. So that's just an example there. Okay, functional labs that I would love to have the look at. If we had the luxury of doing a little bit of extra testing, the best case scenario is we would do a female sex hormone test. And my preference for sex hormones is going to be saliva or urine versus a blood draw. It's just a little bit more accurate. So I use the ZRT labs. We do a saliva test to check for estrogen and progesterone. We check testosterone, DHEA, cortisol. And all of this is just fancy ways of saying we check where your hormones are at to see where your cycle's at, how your ovulation is, and of course that's necessary for a happy, healthy baby. The last two functional lab tests I recommend is a gut microbiome test to really get a really clear snapshot of your gut microbiome, which is essential for an optimal pregnancy because of course your gut microbiome gets passed on to your baby, and that is what makes up the building blocks of your baby's immune system. So of course we want the gut microbiome and all of the good bacteria really thriving in your gut for your baby. And then the final test that I would love to do is do something called the minerals and metals test, or also known as the hair tissue mineral analysis test, which really checks your electrolyte status and heavy metals. This blew my mind when I learned this, but heavy metals and toxins and chemicals can actually get stored in the placenta. And there's so many studies and so much research really showing us nowadays that various toxins are being shown in placenta tissue nowadays that never were in the past. So we'll get more into that in a sec. So again, we want to make sure that you're working with a functional or an integrative practitioner to really read these functional based labs and to look at your blood work again from a functional perspective or through optimal ranges versus just what's in range, right? We want to be looking at what's optimal for you wanting to conceive. Where do we want those nutrient levels to be before you have a baby? Okay, so that is preconception testing. Whew, we got that out of the way. Let's get to the fun stuff. So preconception detox. So as I mentioned, research is showing us now that they are finding all kinds of things in placenta tissue nowadays that we never had before. So there are hundreds of thousands of man-made chemicals that each and every one of us are exposed to on a daily basis. And the concern is, of course, that a lot of these toxins that we're being exposed to, gets absorbed through our skin or through our gut, through the foods that we eat or through the lungs that we breathe in terms of air pollution, and really absorbs into the body. And unfortunately, a lot of these toxins can get stored in the placenta and cross the tissue of the placenta and unfortunately enter into the growing fetus inside of the placenta. So research shows that some of the main toxins that have been found in placental tissue is things like, again, heavy metals. So things like lead and mercury and cadmium, all of these have been found. So hence why we want to maybe test for heavy metals first. Microplastics. This is so sad. This wasn't a thing 50 or 100 years ago, but now with the extensive use of plastics, there are microplastics in placenta tissue and then therefore in the blood of our growing fetus. BPAs from plastics. They're finding things like pesticides and glyphosate in placental tissue. Flame retardants, we call them BPDEs, the off-gassing of the mattress that you're sleeping on every night, or the linens that you sleep on, or when you get into your car on a hot day, the off-gassing from the seats, right? We don't want our mattress to go up in flames if there's a fire, so they spray flame retardants on them, but unfortunately we breathe that in, that gets into our system, it also gets into the placenta. So that sounds a little bit sad, and I don't want to be a negative Nancy on that. And I really want to just expand awareness into some of the things that we could be doing. And if we had the choice, if we had the luxury of choice and we had the time, then maybe we'd be doing something like a preconception detox, which some basic things is, of course, number one, like stop alcohol for a few months before you're looking to conceive, or really focus on just low tox living. So how can you eliminate cosmetics and household cleaning products, toothpastes and body care products that aren't maybe from the most natural sources and switch them to more natural things. That's one of the best things you can do, one of the lowest hanging fruit. Another thing that I would do if it was my body is I would start to open up my detox and drainage pathways. So I'd be doing things like sauna and dry brushing and Epsom salt baths, right? Your skin is the largest organ, and actually through sweat, we push a lot of heavy metals and toxins out through the skin, obviously reducing the toxin load inside of our body by sweating it out. So we'd really want to open up those drainage pathways. And then definitely I would personally be doing a functional medicine detox. So really just giving your body and your liver everything that it needs to detoxify really well. You're eating more simple, eating a little bit more clean, and making sure, of course, we're not detoxing during pregnancy. So pregnancy is not the time for that. But if you do have that time beforehand, like I would be preparing my body at least 3 to 6 months, minimum 3 months, 6 months, 3 to 6. That's a great amount of time to start really preparing your body for the happiest, healthiest possible pregnancy. Okay, so that's preconception detox. Number 3 is preconception nutrition. So just as we mentioned, we're wanting to really reduce our toxin load. That's one of the main goals with preconception nutrition is eating organic, eating more whole, natural, clean foods where there isn't the presence of so much pesticide and glyphosate and those types of things, as well as we're eating to really build up our nutrient stores and really supporting our hormonal and our gut health. So really building up, all those vitamins and minerals that we mentioned, and we'll get into specifics of what those are and maybe some of the foods that you can eat, but really eating just organic and whole and natural foods, shopping organic produce or organic meats, grass-fed meats, and really minimizing our processed foods, our sugars, our gluten, really refined fruit foods, anything that comes in a box, a bag, a tin, a can, and really shopping your farmer's market or getting to know your local organic farmer and shopping with them instead. As well as for preconception nutrition, we don't want to do too much fasting. So really important for hormonal health is we need to balance our blood sugar. And if we're doing too much fasting, we're not getting the nutrition we need. We really put our body into a more depleted state before getting pregnant. And we want actually the opposite. We want to have an abundance of nutrient stores. We want to build up the nutrition in our tissues because naturally through pregnancy and growing a human, we donate, right? Our body donates so much of our nutrition to the growing baby. So we don't want to steal from our tissues. We want to have more than enough to supply for the baby. Okay. And really building up these nutrient stores, the value of that is that it's really going to prevent a lot of the pregnancy discomforts that we see so often nowadays. Things like preventing low energy, making sure our iron levels are nice and high, preventing that fatigue. A lot of women can prevent or minimize a lot of morning sickness by making sure that their vitamin B6 levels are nice and high. So there's a lot of value, in building up those nutrient stores beforehand, and it gets to be delicious, right? It's not about pulling out everything. It's really just about adding more of what's really nutritious. So adding in, I personally, one of the hormone balancing hacks that I do is I eat chocolate. And if you follow me on Instagram, maybe you've seen recently, I've shared my hormone balancing superfood raw chocolate recipe that I'm absolutely in love with. And there's days that I'll actually have a piece of this amazing hormone balancing chocolate with my breakfast. So it gets to be delicious. And if you would like that recipe, I'd be so happy to share it with you. Just message me on Instagram, chocolate, and I'll send you the link to the recipe. And it gets to be delicious, balancing our hormones. So that's my desire for you. Okay, so that is our preconception nutrition. Let's get into preconception supplements. So as we mentioned, a lot of our nutrients get depleted during pregnancy. Naturally, a lot of our body's nutrition stores get donated to the baby. And the goal here is we really don't want to allow the growing fetus to kind of steal the nutrient stores from the mama's bones and the tissues. So again, we want to build up that surplus, more than enough, right? So that it doesn't have to steal from our tissues, but we have more than enough to generously give to the baby so that they can grow vibrantly, and brain development and spine and skeletal development, all of those important things. So I want to share with you in terms of supplements, I want to share with you the key nutrients that get depleted during pregnancy and where we may consider supplementation. Is it really necessary? What to supplement? And again, I'll just preface all of this entire episode. I have to say that this is not medical advice. We're not treating, we're not diagnosing, we're not curing. This isn't a treatment plan for pregnancy. This is what I would do if I was wanting to conceive. This would be my personal preconception plan. And these are some health tips that I share with my clients that they may or may not take on based on my own experience and my own training. But again, not a medical doctor, and I do have to say that when we get into all this fancy language. Okay, the main nutrients that get depleted that we may consider supplementing is things like folate. So this is one of the most common ones, right? We always hear about folic acid with pregnancy. Now, the tricky thing is I would never actually take folic acid. If it was me, I would never take a folic acid supplement. And the reason why is that 60% of the population can't break folic acid down into its bioavailable form. And so it accumulates, it becomes toxic, and can unfortunately even lead to miscarriage. So if you are supplementing folate, which is amazing and we need folate, we want it in its bioavailable form. So we want it in the 5-methylfolate form, not folic acid. Okay, so not all supplements are created equal. I did create an entire podcast episode on this. It is episode number 7 called The Ultimate Guide to Nutritional Supplements. And I share exactly the differences and how to read your supplement label, how to know if your supplements are good quality or not, how some of the main concerns in the supplement industry and how we're not always getting what we think we are. But I also talk about this folic acid, debate out there. My recommendation is, of course, to take a most bioavailable form. So whether you have the genetic code that doesn't allow you to break down folic acid or not, it's just a wise choice to take 5-methylfolate, because probably you haven't done that genetic testing to see why, 60% of the population can't break down folic acid. So long story short, just go with 5-methylfolate. You'll be good to go. But folate's really important for the early development of the baby's nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord. And of course, depletion of that folate during pregnancy can increase, concerns and risks. So we do want to make sure that folate is nice and high. Also important is iron. So iron is really important for the production of the baby's blood, their hemoglobin, getting oxygen to the baby's tissues and their organs. It's also really important because through pregnancy, the woman's blood volume increases significantly, and therefore her demand for iron is also so important for the formation of those brand new red blood cells needed for the mama and the developing baby. Low levels of iron during pregnancy can really lead to a lot of fatigue as well for the mama. So a lot of that low energy levels, lower levels of mood, we want to be really looking at those iron levels. So I eat a predominantly plant-based diet. I've worked with a lot of clients, vegan pregnancies, and even a close friend of mine that's in that chapter of preconception right now, she's also vegan. Yeah, we decided looking at her blood work, we're like, she's not out of the reference range with her iron levels, but going into pregnancy with suboptimal levels, right? It wasn't in the optimal range. For me, looking at it, a Western doctor would say, oh, you're fine. It was 1 mark in of the reference range. And the reference range is massive. So I was saying with this friend, I said, let's get your iron levels into a better place. Let's supplement iron with vitamin C. That's important for absorption to prevent a lot of that lower levels of energy, to ensure that the blood volume can really grow in a healthy way and that she's not depleted in iron. Okay, calcium is super important for the development of the baby's bones and teeth. And of course, if the mama's calcium intake is not enough, then the body will start to draw and steal that calcium from the mama's bones to give it to the baby. So we don't want that. That's less than ideal. Vitamin D, that's really important, of course, for calcium absorption, as well as the baby's bone health, their brain development. So that's going to be important, and we may supplement if we have lower levels of vitamin D. Iodine is really important, especially for thyroid health, which is essential for the baby's brain development, as well as for the mother's cognitive and energy levels throughout pregnancy, as well as for the development of the baby. So levels of iodine we may test for and supplement if needed. And then the last few here is omega-3 fatty acids, especially with DHA, is essential for the baby's brain and eyes development, for cognitive and visual development of the baby, as well as to maintain the mother's health. A lot of the B vitamins are essential, especially vitamin B6 and 12. And low vitamin B6 with pregnancy is often associated with morning sickness. So if a woman isn't getting enough vitamin B6 from her diet, or she's not supplementing, she's more prone to morning sickness. And what I've seen with my clients is that we start to supplement vitamin B6 or increase foods with an abundance of vitamin B6, that morning sickness either reduces or subsides altogether, which is great. B12 is also essential, and a deficiency in that vitamin B12 during pregnancy is not ideal for the just neurological development of the baby. So we want to make sure we're getting enough of that. So vitamin B12, by the way, is not just for women eating a plant-based diet. Actually, so much of the world population is deficient in B12 simply because of the soil depletion, right? B12 is actually, it's not a vitamin, it's a microorganism, and it's alive in its most bioavailable form in the soil. And back in the day, we used to pull a carrot out of the ground, kind of brush off the dirt and just eat it directly. And we were getting B12 on that carrot, not because it's animal-based, but because of the microorganisms present in the soil. The reason why there's so much B12 in meat is actually because of the bacteria present in meat. But unfortunately, our soil quality is just so depleted nowadays that we're not getting the B12 from plant-based sources that we used to back in the day from those microorganisms. Okay, last two that we may consider supplementing or testing for and seeing what your levels are at, making sure they're optimal, is zinc and magnesium. So both of these are essential for the nervous system development, for muscle development, for the immune system of both the mama and the baby, which is really important. So we'd want to look at those as well. So a good overall hack, let's say at least 3 months before pregnancy, is to maybe get on some sort of prenatal vitamin that is a multivitamin. And again, please listen to the Ultimate Guide to Nutritional Supplements episode where I explain how to find the supplement that is going to be best for you. We want to be purchasing functional medicine, therapeutic grade supplements. The overall rule is don't buy your nutritional supplements from the same place that you buy your toilet paper, because you're not going to be getting the quality or the quantity of the nutrients that you really need for it to have an effect. We want to be purchasing it from our practitioner, actually, who has access to practitioner only functional medicine grade brands that are going to have the science and the research and the dosage that's really needed to have an impact, and no bad stuff like no folic acid that can contribute to health issues. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so that was preconception supplements. Let's get into our last two. So number 5 for preconception health is we really want to optimize our gut health. So there is such a vast connection between our gut microbiome as women, which creates so much of our vaginal microbiome as women. And through that vaginal microbiome, this is where through the baby passing through the vaginal canal, through childbirth, they're basically bathed and coated in this delicious vaginal bacteria microbiome that is infused into the baby, which actually creates the building blocks of the baby's immune system. So really optimizing our gut and optimizing the good bacteria, doing any protocols necessary to eliminate bad bacteria or parasites or pathogens in the gut, and really repopulating the gut with good bacteria with the use of good quality probiotics, reducing inflammation in the gut. If there's any inflammation or if you have any gut or digestive based issues, I would personally be working on that, 3 to 6 months before you may want to conceive, and really just get your gut in the best possible position for ideal pregnancy, but also the healthiest baby and the baby's immune system as well, which is really sweet. And then finally, last tip for preconception health in our plan is to optimize hormones. So all of our hormones matter when it comes to pregnancy. Of course, our sex hormones, right? Adequate levels of estrogen and progesterone in the right ratio, testosterone in the right ratio, are more like masculine sex hormone that women also should have in small amounts, as well as our thyroid hormones, which are essential for healthy pregnancy. Our stress hormones, such as cortisol, right? We want to make sure that all of these hormones are in harmony with one another. They're all functioning really great to really create that optimal pregnancy. So if you are on birth control, let's say, whether you're on hormonal birth control, pill, or an IUD of any sort, or any form of birth control, hormonal or not, other than the fertility awareness method or natural birth control, we'd really want to be coming off that minimum 3 months, ideally 6 months, ideally a year. 3 months to a year, okay? To come off those more synthetic or unnatural forms of birth control, as it takes several months. It can take a couple of months for the communication between our brain and our ovaries to come back online after so many years, let's say however many years you've been on birth control. That communication between the pituitary gland in the brain and the ovaries producing sex hormones has kind of been severed. That's what birth control does. It shuts down the communication between the brain and the ovaries, and it takes time for that connection and that communication to come online again. So we really want to optimize our hormones before we get into pregnancy as well. So I hope this was helpful. There is so much more that we could talk about, you guys, when it comes to preconception health, when it comes to some of the practices. Of course, this is just some of the basics when it comes to the physical body. Of course, the needs for a woman entering into pregnancy, what an initiation. There's so many emotional needs and energetic and even spiritual things that should be talked about. So there's so much more that we could get into when it comes to preconception health, and I'll leave that for another episode. And of course, if you have any questions or anything that you'd like for me to speak on, any questions or curiosities, you can always send me a message on Instagram at Bindi Stables or reach me on email. It's info at my website, which is bindistables.com. I'd love to hear your questions, and of course, happy to dedicate podcast episodes to your questions as well. So thank you for listening. I would love to invite, if you are in a space where within the next 3 months to a year, you are looking to conceive and create the happiest, healthiest pregnancy possible for you and your partner, I'd love to invite you into my private preconception health program called the Vibrant Mama to Be, which is exactly where we really prepare and optimize your body for creating the happiest, healthiest pregnancy possible. So if that's you, you're looking to get pregnant within the next 3 months to a year or so, and you want to be proactive with your conception, you want to create a conscious conception, and you'd like that physical and or emotional and spiritual support, there's a few different levels that we can work with, whether it's just the functional medicine integrative side of things, or I also, as a holistic counselor and mindset and well-being coach, I work with somatic healing. I also support women on the emotional side, the initiation of entering into this big initiation of motherhood. So please send me a DM on Instagram. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear when you're hoping to conceive and start or grow your family, and see how I may be able to help inside the Vibrant Mama to Be preconception health program. So thank you so much for listening. I would love to hear your takeaways from this podcast episode. Send me a DM on Instagram. Please share this episode with anyone you think it could serve. If you have a friend that you know wants to fall pregnant within the next year, or share it with your partner and listen to this together. And I'd love to see your takeaways. So look forward to hearing from you. I'm wishing you a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll see you back for another episode real soon. Take care.